Hi everyone, and welcome to Straight Talk with Steph. We are on the Women in Property series today. If you haven't already, you need to head over to Amazon and buy that book. Today we've got the amazing Alice Garnett from Lioness Properties, and her chapter is just absolutely jam-packed. Really exciting stories. She talks about how she bought a book. Didn't buy a book. He wrote a book. How she bought a property age 21 in the pub. How she was inspired by Property Ladder, how she's walked into properties with cannabis grow rooms. She's had it all. So, Alice, how the devil are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Steph. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I've got to start with the fact that you said sometimes the best decisions are made in the pub.
Yeah, I think that most of us know this to be true, right? The best and worst decisions are normally made in the pub. So I started my property journey in my second year of uni. It was 2008-9. The financial recession had happened. I grew up in the south where property was and still is notoriously expensive. And I'd come to university in Nottingham where I saw the price of houses as maybe a quarter of what I was used to growing up. My teenage boyfriend at school, his dad had been a very successful builder, and I'd remember kind of being incredibly interested in how his dad had managed to retire. By the time he was 50, they had a very large second home in the south of France, all that kind of stuff. And I'd gone back over one of my uni breaks, basically, and I'd met up with my now ex-boyfriend, but it was still kind of pretty good mates. And I was talking about all of these houses in Nottingham and how cheap they were at the moment. And he at the time was looking for another project as well. His dad was trying to encourage him to go into building, basically. And so we decided to do what I now know to be a JV, basically, where I would kind of like find a property in a decent area in Nottingham, and we would kind of raise the cash to go and buy it and do a flip. And this was in the Three Magnets pub in Letchworth, my hometown, that we were sat there having cider and deciding at, I think, 2021 how this was absolutely a great idea, in complete ignorance of how naive we were and how little we actually knew.
Work out for you, that flip, that particular one, or that particular first investment.
I'll be honest, we broke even, I think, which with hindsight, we actually got really lucky on. I think with hindsight, we probably should have lost some more money. We made such silly mistakes, honestly. Looking back, I cringe, it's painful now. So things like we wanted to make it light and bright, so we bought an almost white cream carpet and put it down everywhere, which obviously did not go very well at all. We went for the cheapest kitchen we could possibly find. So I was absolutely like rigorous with the budget, that we were going to spend the absolute minimum we could get away with. We put the cheapest taps in, we put the cheapest everything in. And obviously the feedback that we got when we actually came to sell it was that everyone went, well, actually, this is a really cheap finish. And they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong. It absolutely was. So that was like my major lesson learned really from that, was that cheaper does not always mean better.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think you can spot cheap a mile off. You can spot cheap when you go into, I've gone onto HMO sites for clients, or, people who are doing HMO. We've had a look, and you can see the difference in people who are scrimping and saving. And obviously that's reflected in the rent, isn't it, sometimes as well? You can see it in a flip finish to a buy-to-let finish is always very different. People can spot it. So obviously that's a lesson learned that influences what you do today.
Massively.
But as I say, that first flip in Nottingham had its fair share of rookie mistakes. So what are some of those lessons that you've taken from all of this that you implement today?
So definitely the one that cheaper isn't always better is the obvious one. Looking at areas as well and working out your potential buyer type before you start, that's super important as well. So if you're looking at family homes, what about the parking, what about the garden, all of that type of things. First impressions count, so I pay a lot of attention to hallways, in the way that I think the hallway is often missed, but actually most buyers will come up with first impression within the first 10 seconds of walking into a flip. So one of the things I kind of really like to do, even in my HMOs, is have a really nice hallway. So I do like a good chandelier. So even in my HMOs, a nice chandelier as you walk in, I think just sets the tone quite nicely. So my HMOs and flips are definitely now geared towards the higher end of the market. You get better tenants, they stay for longer, they pay more, And with flips as well, they're more desirable. So the higher up the market that you go, the less willing people are to do renovation work, but the more they're willing to pay to have it done for them to start with.
Yeah, and that's ensuring like you've got the exit then to sell and
Yeah.
to sell. And like you said, catering to the market. So what market you're buying for, you choose the strategy first.
Yeah.
So I know you're doing flips at the moment, but
Mm.
you actually did transition from this capital growth flip sort of strategy to high cash flow and focus HMOs. What triggered that shift, and why? Why did you want to go into more high cash flowing strategies?
Yeah. So my background is training as a teacher, and obviously you all know from your own experience that it's physically and mentally pretty hardcore. Like, it is hard work, and I do love it, and I still do it because I absolutely love my classes, love my students. So I still do that part time out of passion, really. And that, even though that being the case, I don't want to be beholden to a job. I want to be able to, if it does ever become too much, if it ever starts being fun, if I ever lose the love from it because of my HMO portfolio, I cannot quit. And
Yeah.
that is such a peace of mind, basically. That completely changes your outlook on a job, knowing that actually you're doing it because you want to do it, not because you have to do it. So in terms of mental well-being, that's a massive kind of bonus. And the other reason why cash flowing strategies are kind of so important for me as a single female is that actually I don't have that second income. And if I wanted to have a family in the future, have kids, anything like that, my HMOs will basically pay for me to have a maternity leave if I want to, without having to rely on any sort of partner. And again, the freedom, the peace of mind that that creates in terms of being a woman, having that financial freedom, is massive.
That's amazing. That is so empowering, isn't it?
Mm,
And the fact that you've put yourself in that situation, you have
mm,
created this yourself. You haven't had any help. You haven't had a leg up. You've literally done it all yourself. And I love that because at the moment, I think teaching has been for some time. It is in a recruitment crisis. They're
mm,
struggling to get teachers. They're struggling to keep teachers in the classroom. But the fact that obviously you quite like your job, you quite want to,
mm.
you're quite happy to stay there, but you have that security net. You've created that for yourself. It's job isn't the security net anymore for you.
Yeah,
Which is, people
absolutely.
say go and you get a nice job, nice
Mm,
pension, pay your mortgage off, be safe, be secure. Well,
mm.
actually, jobs aren't really secure.
No,
Jobs are
not
not
at all.
secure. Teaching really isn't as well at times. Depends on the school, depends on the budget.
Yeah.
You've created your own safety net in what other people perceive as a relatively risky industry. I think it's fucking amazing. So, like, huge hats off to you.
Thank
Speaking of
you.
student HMOs, then, because
Mm,
they you've got some student HMOs and they're really good cash flow and
mm.
assets that you've got. You did buy a former student house from your old landlord.
Yeah, I
Didn't
absolutely
you?
did.
That was your
Yeah. So
networking paying off, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So once I'd done a couple of kind of live-in flips to raise capital, I basically split my money pot in two. So one money pot I used to still do the live-in flips for the tax advantages there, and the other pot I started buying minimos with. And I was looking for a student HMO. So I went to uni in Nottingham. I know the student areas really well because that's my lived experience. And I noticed that my old student let that I rented for 2 years while I was a student was on the market, and I still had my old landlord's number. So I texted him and I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting. Seeing this for sale, I'm looking to buy. Do you want to go meet in the pub and have a chat about it?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we did. We had a chat. We agreed a private sale price basically, and that was how I acquired my first Minimo. So that was great. I think I bought it for 103,500,
Wow.
and it's been revalued recently at 300,000 because it had
Yeah.
a refurb, a dormer loft extension that I did to it as well. The great thing about the student HMOs is that they are, because they back onto the university. One of them literally backs onto the university, and you've got a major hospital 2 minutes walk away as well. There's strong demand in that area, and there will always be. So they let really quickly, the student ones. So
Yeah.
yeah, great. No regrets about that purchase at all.
That's brilliant because you've got your students, you've got your hospitals.
Mm,
So that when you cater to two different markets or target markets, if you like, you're almost reducing the voids that you could potentially have. And I think
yeah,
that's when people just go for work and professionals,
yeah,
you end up with more voids, more of a higher turnover, but you're actually bulletproofing it for that, which is brilliant. So I want to talk now. So I want to talk about repossessed properties with cannabis grow rooms to spray painted walls. And we've all walked into a property, I'm sure, and gone, oh my God, what has happened here? Looks like people have been squatting, some of the ones I've viewed recently.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sometimes see past that when you're a beginner, or it's hard to see past that when you don't know the potential that a property has. How do you now approach a property when you first walk through a door?
Yeah. So for me, I'm just completely ignore the decoration because you're going to redo it anyway. You know, the weird smells and the carpet and everything else. Well, you're going to rip out the carpet, so it doesn't matter. So for me, I'm really looking at the floor plan. I'm looking at the available space. If it's a cheaper refurb, I'm thinking, are the walls in the right place? Is the plumbing in the right place? Is the kitchen big enough? Are the windows in the right place? All the really expensive stuff, is that kind of in the right place already? But yeah, I know the flip that you're talking about. So this was just before COVID. It was a very decent semi-detached 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, very big garden. It was a repossessed property. They had an animal kind of breeding, I think snakes and birds going on downstairs. And then the loft, they've been growing quite a lot of weed in. It was the most well-lit loft I've ever been in my entire life. There was very impressive lighting going on in there. But they'd scooped out of the insulation in the loft, and they'd put soil in between all of the rafters. So absolute nightmare, because in a repossessed property, it's full of stuff as well. You've got furniture, mattresses, clothing, all kinds of stuff strewn around everywhere. So the first thing you have to do is get a clearance company to come and clear it all out. And the amount of variation that we had to have in the quotes for the clearance company, when I was like, yeah, there's all this stuff here that's got to go, and the carpet's got to go. And by the way, do you remove soil from lofts? That was a unique conversation that I've never had to have since, but we got there in the end. But really, it's looking at the space, it's looking at the bones, because you are going to rip everything out anyway. So ignore smells, ignore decor, ignore the rubbish strewn around everywhere, because all of that is fixable within a week if you get the right clearance company.
Oh my God, yeah, that's my favorite part, is the rip out and seeing everything get trashed and then the transformation. Do you know what? Sometimes I think, I mean, you don't know what tenants get up to, and I'd like to think that none of my tenants would ever do it. But I'd like to think it's probably a better ROI if you let them crack on with growing it, get maybe more cash flow. So talking about flips and talking about, you've mentioned a few times like you live in flips. That's really financially strategic, but it's also, I think it can be a bit tough moving from house to house. So have you got any sort of moments with that strategy that you think have been particularly hard, and how do you keep pushing forward? Because a lot of people do the PPR strategy and it's quite difficult for people. So how do you keep pushing forward? What are the hard, difficult things that come with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this was something that I really did in my 20s. I was going to say hesitate to do it now, but actually the one that I'm speaking to you from right now was actually a probate purchase that I got for cheap as well. Yeah, definitely hard moments. So during the kind of rip out phases, because I would buy a house and then live in it and do it up as I was slowly getting money in. So there have been times where I've lived in houses where actually there isn't carpet down at the moment. And I remember the dust used to really like annoy me, basically, where things were dusty a lot of the time. Or when the boiler isn't quite working properly, or you've got exposed floorboards, and there are some rooms that you just shut the door and you don't go into. I would say my key strategies really were, I always did my bedroom and the living room first. Really, if you got a functional kitchen, functional bathroom, but then decorate your kitchen and your living room, and everything else you can do as and when. You can just kind of close the door with it. But yeah, I honestly, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've moved house now in my 20s. It's got to be at least 8 or 9 at this point. But there are so many tax advantages to it, particularly stamp duty having gone up in the last budget, going up again in April, and the mortgage advantages as well, only having to put 10% down. It's so capital efficient doing this strategy. It's hard to kind of shy away from it, I think. And the idea of living in one house and not moving, I've never done that. I've always moved every 2 years. So I think particularly if you're in a state where actually you don't have children yet, this strategy is a really good one to consider.
Yeah. So do you know what? It is a really good one. And I've got 3 clients at the moment who are doing that strategy. and they're actually buying in different places, so different council, different borough to where they actually live, so they can actually keep their rental property, which is a bit sneaky, but it's something that they can do if they want to. And I think it's, people say to us, why don't you do it? But I'm so settled where I am, and I don't think I would get the view that I've got if I left.
Yeah.
But it is such a good, you've got the tax, you've obviously got no capital gains tax, 10% deposit. You'll have a cheaper mortgage rate as well, because it's personal name, it's your private residential property. So for anyone listening, that is a really good strategy. And like you said, unless it's more difficult if you've got children, you're recruiting them. But if you're single, or even if you're not and you don't have kids, it's a fantastic strategy. Okay, so so you just said you're sat there waiting for a valuer today.
I am. He's running hours late. It's annoying, but I mean, this is part of the game. This is life.
Part of the game. Valuers can be your best friend, or they can be the bane of your life. If you get them on the side, they're brilliant. So your explanation in the book of valuation methods, I thought was fascinating. And I want you to break down for me, or can you break down for the listeners, why understanding valuation methodology is really important for investors, particularly in the HMO space?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, how do you take a house? So I've got 2 HMOs in build at the moment. One of them, I think we got a purchase price of 158 on it, and the end value that I'm looking for is 420 for it. So obviously those numbers are far, far, far apart. And one of the big questions is, how do you go from a house being worth 158,000 to 420,000? And the key kind of secret to it, because we're not gatekeeping anything here, is that actually the 158 number is done on what's called a bricks and mortar valuation, which is where you're looking up and down the street and you're saying, okay, what did the houses on the street sell for within sort of a quarter of a mile, right? Those are then your comparables. When you buy and sell houses in your own personal name, and you're doing flips, that's what you're using. You're using bricks and mortar valuation. So loads of people listening have probably used that already, but they just don't know what it is. That's your standard normal one, if you like. When you're doing HMOs and you have 6 rooms or above, generally speaking, it's not a family home anymore. It's actually classified as a business. So because it's a business, just as if it were a shop or another type of income generating activity, it's valued differently. So instead of having a bricks and mortar valuation, you have a commercial valuation. So instead, what you're doing is you're taking the rent, you're using a multiplier based on demand for property, rooms of that type in that area, and then that is going to generate a commercial value, basically. So done on a commercial valuation, it's swapping from one type of surveyor to a different type of surveyor that then generates that end number of 420. Because what you're saying to the bank is that this isn't a family home anymore, this is a business, and I want it to be valued based on the income that it's likely to generate in the future, not based on the houses next door, because it's no longer like the houses next door. And to get that type of valuation, you've got to make it really clear that actually this is kind of no longer a family home. It would be incredibly difficult to turn back to a family home. So the type of HMO building that I do tends to be 6-bedroom, everything's got an ensuite, and most things have kitchenettes in as well. So they definitely don't resemble family homes anymore, because I want that commercial value.
Yeah, absolutely. And then ultimately you'd be able to pull. So when people do like buy, refurb, refinance on bricks and mortar, there's only so much money you can pull back out. But in some instances with HMO, particularly if you get your higher commercial val, you're able to pull a lot more, if not all of it out. Sometimes it can be money in, money out. And I want to talk about the financing of this. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, but weirdly for me, I mean, I didn't know it until I got on property. It's like you can use other people's money, and it's brilliant. It sounds really scary, but if you know your figures and you're educated, it's not that scary. It's just a numbers game. So you managed to raise finance to carry on with your property journey, in addition to your generating the profit from your residential flips. Your first private investor came from a conversation over a board game.
Yeah, this is true. So one of my hobbies is board game playing. It's something I've kind of grown up on. It's always been a big part of my family household. So in terms of strategic planning and thinking 10 steps ahead, this is kind of literally what I grew up on, really. And every August bank holiday, my family have a big kind of open house house where people come and they play board games, and it's really cool.
Okay.
And it was one of my mum's friends had come to spend the weekend there, play some board games. She'd recently had her father pass away, and they'd sold his house, split the money, and she was left with this pot of cash. And she didn't really know what to do with it, really. So we've been playing a couple of games, and looking back, quite luckily now, I'd been winning quite a lot of them. And this, I think, kind of perhaps it suggested to her that I was, you know, reasonably intelligent and kind of could think strategically and this sort of thing. So we had a little chat about, oh, what do you do? Oh, what do you do? This sort of thing. And I'd mentioned like the property and the numbers and everything else. And then she was very interested in that. She arranged a discovery call. We chatted through timescales and interest rates and that sort of thing. And yeah, she, from meeting me and, you know, playing games at the weekend, decided that actually she was going to put her trust in me, and we created this win-win situation. So I think one of the misconceptions about raising angel finance is that you're asking people for money.
Yep.
You're not. You're promising them that you are going to give them a 2 or 3 times better return on their money than they would get if they put it in the banks alone. Okay. So it's a good deal for them and it's a good deal for you. And that's the kind of mindset that you need to have when it comes to having these financial conversations with people. All the angel finance that I do, it all comes with a personal guarantee. So if for whatever reason a flip deal didn't work out, well, actually I could sell something else in my portfolio, I'd remortgage something in my portfolio, I would even sell my own house. There's that personal reassurance that the only way that they don't get their money back is if I've lost all of mine. And also I think I had that credibility because I had put all my own money in. I'd done these flips before. I'd bought my minimos scaling upwards. So there's that credibility. You've got to have some skin in the game, really, to look viable for potential investors.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You have got the skin in the game. And a lot of people, like you said, it's an opportunity. It's a win-win. You're not asking people for money. But you know, it's almost like the more you scale up in your property business, the safer you are. The more debt you're in, the more money you make, and the safer you are. You've got leverage. And I always say that if anyone wanted their money back, I mean, no one ever wants their money back because the interest rates are so good. Their money back, it'd be a case of, right, well, absolutely, I'm gonna, unless I can pull it out for property or find another angel to replace that person, I can sell something and it's no problem, and nobody is going to be left worse off. I love that. I really feel really pleased for you that you've managed to do that. So Lioness Properties, born from a very, and I love the name of it, by the way, it's fierce and almost like unapologetic. It's born from a very personal motivation. So what's your long-term vision for Lioness Properties, for the company, for the portfolio? Where are we going?
To keep expanding, keep going. I think one thing that I've been reflecting on in 2025 is actually what a great network that I've built locally. I have an absolutely fabulous team now. I've got some build companies that I love to work with. They're great guys. I've got a fabulous solicitor, broker. So my power team that I've spent the past kind of 3 years building in Nottingham and Derby is so strong. And I absolutely love what I do. Like I really do. So to keep expanding, keep growing. So my hopes this year were to do 2 or 3 flips and then add another HMO as well, just to keep growing that kind of cash bundle. So I'm not planning to scale down or slow down particularly at all. So yeah, exciting times.
Really exciting. And from 21-year-old Alice, who made that decision in the pub, if you could go back to 21-year-old Alice and give her one piece of advice before buying that first property, what would it be?
I think it would be that price is not the same as the value. There are 2 different things. The value of something is not necessarily what you pay for it. So just be very mindful of making sure you're looking for value, not just looking for a low price.
Love that. Thank you so much, Alice. There's so many nuggets, and so it's so rich in your experience. Your story is amazing. So guys, go out, buy the Women in Property book, volume 1, and you can catch this episode very soon. Alice, I hope you get the value that you want on this property today.
Thank you.
And if you don't, get another bloody valuer.
Yeah, I will.
Thanks, guys.